going back to the beginning of Autix, right, of just being able to track modifications was the initial thinking around this. And then I started to hear from people, and it wasn't the primary driver of the conversation, but it came up in multiple conversations of people put a bunch of money into their modified cars. And at the end of the day, when you go to sell it, right, a lot of people it's either two things. They're either A, okay with taking a loss, which shouldn't be, right? Or B, they'll part it out. They'll take all the mods off and sell them separately. Because at a dealer or wherever else you try to go sell these, you don't get the value out of it. So our tagline, if you will, is maximizing the value of modified and specialty vehicles as an asset class, right? So thinking of these vehicles that are modified as an asset in your portfolio, if you will. And in many cases, and data backs this up and shows that SEMA, one of the organizations we're part of, they do a bunch of market research and backs this up, is that people that modify their cars spend anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000 modifying their car, right? So it's how do you extract that value in a meaningful way that's not subjective, that's not an appraiser telling you that it's worth this, that there's actually some data behind it.
Hey, welcome to another episode of McKinney Momentum. I'm so glad you tuned in. Today's episode is going to be special. My name is Luke. I'm the marketing manager here at the MEDC, and we're excited to bring you an interview between Mike Wilkes, our project manager who handles the Innovation Fund, and one of our Innovation Fund portfolio companies, Autix. Jake Hamann is the founder, and it's a great company, very innovative, very unique. Jake's got a great story, a lot of highs, a lot of lows, and it's going to be awesome for you to hear straight from Jake today about the innovation ecosystem here in North Texas and McKinney, some of the projects he's working on, some of the things he's been able to do as a part of his career. It's just very inspiring. So I hope you get something out of it today, and I'll see you here at the end.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us with the McKinney EDC podcast. Here today, we have Jake with Autix, who is one of our Innovation Fund portfolio companies. We're very excited to have him here on the podcast today. You're going to learn a little bit about himself and how he came to be a founder, as well as why he chose McKinney and where his business is taking off. So, Jake, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Mike. Pleasure to be here. So, Jake Hamann, I live in Frisco, but my business is headquartered here in McKinney. Thankfully. And I guess I describe myself as a serial entrepreneur, disruptive innovator, and an ecosystem builder. I don't know how much we'll get into the second two of those, but this is not my first rodeo in terms of what I'm doing with Autix in the startup world, but have been in this space, in the automotive space, for about 2.5 years now. The idea came about 4 years ago, but really turned it into a business and really started pursuing it after I moved down here to Texas. Actually in August of 2021.
Gotcha. So what made you move down to Texas? We're glad you're here,
yeah.
But why the move?
Glad to be here. Opportunity, honestly. I was in a small market back in Illinois in the Peoria area. So I think our metro area was 400,000 people, something like that. So add a couple zeros, or at least one zero, or a couple zeros, and you've got the Dallas market, right?
Yeah.
So with the things I was doing in the space that I'm in the automotive space, there was just a lot more opportunity here. And it wasn't just for Autix, but there were some other things that brought me down from an entrepreneurial ecosystem building perspective, and what was happening here in the Dallas market just made a lot of sense. So yeah, been here since then. Don't regret the decision at all. Still go back and visit family, of course, and yeah, absolutely love it down here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I would love to talk about that ecosystem building piece as it relates to Dallas a little bit later. But just to get started, could you just give an overview of what is Autix?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, it kind of came out of a need, a passion, I guess, whatever you want to call it, of mine, which, a lot of those successful startup stories come from that of, you encountered an issue, you saw there was a problem, and then you figured out a way to try to go solve it.
You solve it yourself. It's
exactly.
The entrepreneurial mindset.
Exactly. So for me, I've been a Jeep enthusiast for all my life. My dad owned tons of Jeeps, military Jeeps, all kinds of different things. So I was kind of naturally brought into that. I think I'm on my 7th or 8th Jeep now that I've owned. But when I bought it in, let's see, when was it? August of 2017, or maybe September. And I bought it from a place, I was living in Illinois, I bought it from a place in Dallas. and spent a good amount of money on it. And I asked them when I bought it, give me a list, a detailed list of the build sheet on this Jeep, right? All the different modifications that have been done to it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm paying this much, let me justify the cost. And the dealer that I bought it from said, well, we don't really have it. You can just go copy and paste the bullet points from the website. It's like, okay, that's somewhat useful, but I was planning to go off-roading in it and take it off-road. So I needed to know specific things around like gear ratio and some of those other specifics that make it eligible to go off-road. So long story short, I had to take it to my dealer, take it up on the rack, pull the differential cover off, measure the gears to figure out some of those things. I'm like, it shouldn't be this way, right? So through some research and talking to fellow Jeepers, but then, you know, in the broader car community, the issue or the challenge kind of became pervasive across all of the aftermarket automotive is people were modifying their cars left and right. Everything from tuners to trucks to Jeeps to classics to supercars, right? And in most cases, people didn't have a good way to track the modifications that were done across all those different categories. So that's kind of the initial idea of where it started, of solving that problem for myself and the smaller group of people. And like I said, that was still in Illinois. It was before I got down here and engaged and encountered the much larger car scene, which was even further validation of the challenge I was trying to solve.
Gotcha. That's an interesting journey. So you came to Dallas and you heard about the fund, or how'd you get involved with McKinney?
Great question. So yeah, I got down to Dallas. The first thing I actually heard about, I was at Dallas Startup Week. Right before I moved down here. It was kind of one of my reasons for moving down here, of some connections and some conversations I had at Dallas Startup Week. And somebody turned me on to Code Launch and said, hey, there's this thing coming up in November. There's an application online. You should go fill it out. I filled that out. Long story short, ended up winning Code Launch in November of 2021. And then through that and just through some other conversations and getting engaged in the ecosystem, you know, here in the DFW area, I got introduced to the EDC, to McKinney's EDC. I think it was Danny Chavez at the time was running it. We had connected. I think it was one of the first round of companies that got funding from the Innovation Fund, and just kind of fell in love with what was going on here in McKinney from early stage startup support, you know, system, and what I had been trying to build back in Peoria. It was very resemblant of what I was trying to do there. So jumped in, got involved, and still here in McKinney.
Well, love that. So the journey, because the Innovation Fund typically invests in early stage company, pre-seed stage companies, if you're familiar. So throughout the journey, could you maybe walk us through how it's gone in the DFW region, using everything the DFW has to offer, being in the fund? How's it gone since you've been in Dallas?
It's been good. So I think going back to, you know, moving down here and no complaints is, I think that being here was the right move because of what's happened for Autix and the opportunities that we've been presented. So, you know, going back to the fund, Code Launch, getting involved, I think part of what I won as being part of Code Launch was a 6-month membership at Formation at the Star, which was super useful from a networking perspective.
Absolutely.
Got involved in a bunch of other accelerators. We ended up winning Capital One's accelerator as part of Dallas Startup Week in 2022. Got involved in the DEC network. A lot of the ecosystem stuff that was going on around here. Had an article in a couple different local-ish publications, which brought us some great visibility. And helped us raise some money too from some that pre-seed stage, right? Friends and family type of money. I will say, you know, institutional and your traditional capital has been challenging, as it has been for a lot of people these days in today's market and today's environment. But we've continued to bootstrap, continue to move forward. Most recently, we got engaged with the UTD over in Richardson. With 2 of their capstone programs, which has been super valuable for us, both on the computer science and the data science side. So the company itself, I wouldn't say we haven't pivoted per se. I think we've just taken a stronger focus on one area of the business, which is this curated value metric, which I can certainly go into detail about that too.
Now is a great time.
Okay, perfect. So going back to the beginning of Autix, right, of just being able to track modifications was the initial thinking around this. And then I started to hear from people, and it wasn't the primary driver of the conversation, but it came up in multiple conversations of people put a bunch of money into their modified cars. And at the end of the day, when you go to sell it, right, a lot of people it's either two things. They're either A, okay with taking a loss, which shouldn't be, right? Or B, they'll part it out. They'll take all the mods off and sell them separately, because at a dealer or, wherever else you try to go sell these, you don't get the value out of it. So our tagline, if you will, is maximizing the value of modified and specialty vehicles as an asset class, right? So thinking of these vehicles that are modified as an asset in your portfolio, if you will. And in many cases, and data backs this up and shows that SEMA, one of the organizations we're part of, they do a bunch of market research and backs this up, is that people that modify their cars spend anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000 modifying their car, right? So it's how do you extract that value in a meaningful way that's not subjective, that's not an appraiser telling you that it's worth this, that there's actually some data behind it. So that's where we were able to leverage these UTD classes, specifically the data science one, to say, and we're working on a patent for this too right now, is in our algorithm, is taking some of these factors that contribute to value, adding them to an MSRP or a base price, and now I've got an actual range of what this vehicle should be worth with all the modifications on it. Because today, like I said, it's very subjective. If you go to any of the auctions, the Barrett-Jacksons, the Meekums, right, if you happen to have somebody there that's willing to pay it and appreciates it, you might get that. But if there's not, then you might take a loss on it. So we're trying to bring we're bringing data and AI to that space and actually putting value behind the values of these vehicles. So without giving away too much, it's really 4 different components. It's service and maintenance history. So if you have a well-documented service and maintenance history on these modified cars, that adds a lot of value. Performance modifications, cosmetic modifications, and then the 4th one, which has been really hard to measure, but we've been able to figure it out kind of from a sentiment perspective, is social sentiment. So provenance of a car, like who's owned it? Has it been in any races? Has it been in any movies? What car shows has it been at? Has it won any awards? All those different types of things, in addition to what are people saying about your vehicle on social media. So a lot of these, car owners that have modified cars have their own separate Instagram accounts or separate pages. So what's that social sentiment like, in the discussion going back and forth? So taking your baseline price, adding all those things to it, we're calling that our X estimate, and it's kind of a value range of what you can expect to get for that vehicle when you go to sell it.
That's interesting, and a tremendous amount of data and science that goes into it. But I do want to take a step back in time for a second when you were just thinking about starting a company. And what was a maybe determining factor, or really just why did you decide to go with a startup? It's a high risk move. I'm glad people make the move because it gives me a job, but it always fascinates me to hear people's reasons for leaving a more secure position to join a startup or to create a startup.
So I guess my answer on that is, I don't know if it's non-traditional. I've always been a serial entrepreneur. So from, it would have been 2001, I've always kind of been in that entrepreneurial space. So I ran a business for my parents. I started my first business, which was a banquet hall of all things, right, in 2002. And then I had a successful company as a services company, a consulting company in 2012 that I sold in 2016. So it's not my first rodeo in this space, but prior to it, I was in a traditional 9-to-5. But then I was running a nonprofit that, the 9-to-5 ended about COVID time, right? Then I was running a nonprofit, and just looking at the market, but then opportunity, right? Like if I want exponential opportunity for myself, for my family and stuff, like doing a startup and launching something is the way to go about it. And I feel like the advantage I guess I had was being part of the ecosystem for so long, for 10 or 15 years, from both a local, regional, and national perspective. I felt like I kind of knew the pieces that went into it and had been educated around everything that goes into launching a startup, being successful, networking, all those different things. So it just made sense. And I got challenged by a couple of good friends, one of them being Trey Bowles from from, the deck and Techstars of move to Dallas, give it 30 days and see what you can do type of thing. And at that point, I was kind of the risk taker and said, okay, I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. And here we are 2.5 years later.
And it paid off. It
It's
worked
paying
out
off.
in the end.
Yes,
It's paying off. What is, would you say, the biggest obstacle that you've faced in this journey so far?
I mean, I'm sure everybody that maybe comes in here, I mean, funding, of course, is the big obstacle.
Certainly.
Right? I think in general, for me as an entrepreneur, the biggest obstacle is around delegation. And I found that, with my first company in 2012, is finding what is the least value add thing I'm doing that I can assign to somebody else and take that off my plate so that I can focus on the things that are more important. Now it's harder as an entrepreneur. It's just me. I've got a chief strategy officer and some part-time people helping with things. So, I can't unload everything. But as much as I can, my background is more in the marketing, branding, digital side of things. So I often will find myself, creating the social media posts or creating the content. But that also is one of the easiest things to offload or to, outsource to somebody else. So I think for any entrepreneur, right, that's trying to do something, what is that least value add piece that you're doing that's taking the most time that you can then, offload or be able to assign to somebody else and have them help you with it?
Certainly. And it would take a tremendous amount of trust, too, because in, this startup in the early stage company, any number of things can go right, but any number of things can go wrong. And so having the trust in when you delegate these tasks would also be just putting myself in your shoes. I think that's something that I would struggle with is, maybe I think I can do this a certain way.
Right.
They might do it a different way, but it still works well. So
that's the hardest thing. I'll just say is like as a graphic designer and somebody that has an eye for design, like giving up creative control to somebody else is one of the hardest things we ever do. Like, and you could probably ask any creative that. It's really difficult. Like, especially for me, is establishing the brand, the look and the feel, and then handing that over to somebody else to work on. You're just like, So
Yep.
it becomes challenging.
I believe it. And that you're in McKinney, you're in the fund, you're in Dallas for a couple of years now. What benefits have you seen when compared, because you have an interesting scope, you've been in multiple entrepreneurial ecosystems. What are some of the benefits of being in McKinney that you've seen?
I think the other recipients of the fund is really, really interesting in the fund itself, in the EDC, just in terms of the connecting and the networking opportunities that it provides. Being able to talk to somebody that might be in a completely different industry, right, but is having a similar challenge, and then either they can provide wisdom on how they overcame that, or vice versa, right? That, oh, well, I encountered that. Here's not advice per se, but suggestions on here's what I did type of thing. So I think that's been super valuable. The events, the networking that happen, the connection to like the North Texas Angel Network, the other groups, the Venture Dallas, those types of things, and the visibility that McKinney and the fund provides, I think is super valuable. I think there's other things that from an ecosystem building perspective that we've talked about that can be done to enhance that further. But for what it is today, I think it's incredible, and it's not really something I've seen. Kind of going back to your comment of being part of a national network and seeing ecosystems across the U.S. I think that's something that DFW has that's somewhat unique that I haven't seen in a lot of other regions in terms of the collaboration across multiple cities, but then from the regional perspective as well.
Certainly. And that's something that we try to be proactive in is, we attract these startups to headquarter in McKinney and be recipients of the fund. But sometimes that could be moving from a different country, moving from a different state, and not, really knowing too much about the region, not having many friends or a community, really. And so that's something that we try to do, and I'm glad to hear that it's been valuable, is get everyone together, and here's a community of peers that you can meet, you can network with, you can get pointers from. And so it's very good to hear that that's been beneficial, and there's a lot more that we can do, but with the progress we've made today, we're in a good spot, but we're always looking to improve. And so on that note of improvement, looking at the region of DFW with, our GDP and the amount of universities we have, it's such a big region with so much to offer. What would your analysis, if you will, of our ecosystem be? How is it?
I think it's healthy. It could be better. Part of what brought me here too was an opportunity to do a research project around early stage capital in DFW when I first moved down here, in addition to Autix. And I got to kind of take a firsthand look at what was going on from support for early stage companies.
Yeah.
Right. And primarily on the financial side and the investment side. And I'll say from an area of improvement, and I just saw a report, I think maybe it was yesterday or the day before, around regionally who is excelling in terms of early stage funding, right? And of course, California led the way, right? It was, or the west side of the
West
U.S.,
Coast,
but it was like 46% was in California, the other were like 0.2 or whatever, right? But then the East Coast and Boston, everything that was going on there, and Chicago was doing well, and then the South was pretty low still in terms of the early stage stuff. And I think that continues, and not just because of Autix, right? But just in general, and from that research I had done, is that early stage capital for, seed, pre-seed, Series A-ish companies, right, that are pre-revenue, that are still kind of bootstrapping it, it's hard to come by. And that's certainly not helped by the market and the way things are today. But I think that's something that, as a region and as an ecosystem that I know several people are talking about, I'm having several conversations about it as well, is something that can always improve.
Certainly.
And we have lots of investment here, but it's more on your traditional side of things, right? Your real estate, your oil and gas, those, that everybody's familiar with. So educating, these investors on what does it look like to invest in early stage companies? What's a good company to look at? What do you look for in the founder and the idea and all those types of things? So I think that's obviously one of the big areas. And, we've talked about it before too, and what can be done to help with that. It's been great to see more and more, networking opportunities come about, as everybody's gotten over the post-COVID thing and getting back together in person and connecting with other people. Like that's been fantastic. So that's always been good. The university involvement's pretty good from, the different universities. I love UTD's program, of course, because we're part of it. I know UNT's doing some stuff. The community colleges are doing amazing things. One area where I think there could be some more, which they actually did really well in the state of Illinois, was the whole connection to the corporate scene. So what does it look like from connecting startups to the corporate clients that are, there's tons of headquarters around here, like lots of them. What's a better way to engage with them? So we had a program in Illinois called the Corporate Startup Challenge that was run by a nonprofit called the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition, and they essentially did a reverse pitch type of thing where they went out, collected needs from the companies, they matched them with startups, they pitched, and then it was up to the company to invest, acquire, whatever it might be with those companies. I believe we could do something similar here, I'm just looking at Plano specifically, right? There's how many companies headquartered in just Plano where something like that could be executed. And in Illinois, it was an annual thing where I think there's enough corporations and interest here. It could be a twice a year, quarterly type of thing, and really driving that engagement from the corporate side with the startup community and bringing them together. And there's some other programs, and this is the beauty of experiencing this stuff on a national perspective, but some stories I had heard around, I believe it was in New Orleans maybe, that somebody that had some money that was passionate about seeing the corporates connect with the startups scheduled a dinner, and they invited like the CEOs of the big companies and then the founders of the startups, and they purposely sat them across the tables from each other just to, share advice, but also talk about their companies.
Yeah.
And it became super valuable from, connecting them in and connecting those dots between the startups and the corporates. So Long answer. Certainly tons of areas to improve upon, but some of the key foundational places are certainly there. And then one of the other things I'm passionate about, once again, as we've discussed, is like, what's our region strategy, right? Every city or jurisdiction or county, whatever, kind of has their own flavor of things, which certainly necessary. But what does it look like from a regional perspective? How do we promote ourselves as the entire DFW region to the rest of the U.S. and the world, that if the stats are true, that we do have like the highest concentration of tech talent in the DFW region, we don't talk about it a lot. And how do we do a better job of talking about that, going out and promoting it? I think with the EDC, spent some time, and some of the other local EDCs spent time at some of the World Congress types of things of promoting what's been going on in the region, more of that. But then getting all the cities and municipalities on board with that same messaging, and what's our approach, from that perspective.
Yeah.
Sorry, really long answer.
No, that was a really great answer. That was good. And I from my perspective, have seen, of course, the concentration of headquarters in business, but also maybe a slight culture shift is in the works of, this past Dallas Startup Week, for example, was all-time attendance. Venture Dallas was sold out like that. I think we're starting to see people just learn about startups, like you said. Someone who is maybe retired and living happily somewhere in the DFW area that could be an accredited investor, maybe just doesn't know about the opportunities.
Exactly.
And so I think with this rise in attendance, we're starting to see a more broad adoption of startups. And I think that that's something that California, we had Greg Head in here at one podcast, and he mentioned you go into a coffee shop in Silicon Valley and you wear like a shirt that says, "Ask me about my startup." You'll have 20 people in there ask you about your startup. Whereas here, it's, what's a startup? Sometimes. And so just to double down on that is certainly an area of improvement and something that we're looking to be helpful in. All right, Jake, so we are coming up on our rapid fire section. So these questions are going to be shot straight at you.
Okay.
Just whatever comes to mind, shoot them off, and I'll fire the next one.
Okay.
What's the best meal you ever ate?
Best meal I've ever ate. I go back to Illinois, where I'm from. It's from Larry's Driftwood. It's a pizza. I will say, and no offense to anybody in the area, I've still not found good pizza in DFW.
Is it Chicago style?
No, it's tavern style. Thin crust, crumbly sausage. I'll just say that, if that helps.
Okay.
But yes.
What was your first job?
First job was in an little local Italian joint called La Gondola. Food service, just like a lot of people.
Yep. That was, I did that as well. What time of day are you most productive?
So I am an early riser, usually up 5:30, 6:30, but most productive time is usually in the evening between 8 and 11. Don't know why. That's just the way it is.
When do you sleep?
11 to 5.
Yeah. You're stuck on a desert island. You can take 3 movies. What are they?
Well, since it's the holiday time, I decided to pick 3 holiday ones, that have been playing pretty much. 2 of them been playing 24 hours recently. So Elf, of course.
Oh, yeah.
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Just saw that this weekend.
And Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas.
I haven't seen that.
Okay, so it's an old Jim Henson Muppet slash thing from back in the 80s when I was little growing up. And they just recently announced they're actually doing a musical around it in Chicago at some point. So, yeah, I think the last time I watched it might have been on DVD, but prior to that was on VHS. That's a video cassette.
I know what that is. Okay, I'm not that young, but okay, so same question, but with books. You can take 3 books. What are they?
3 books. So a little bit of a combination between self-help, personal development, and business. So on the business side, it's really anything from Simon Sinek. Start With Why is my favorite book of his. He's got several others. They're all fantastic. And then the other 2, one is called Good Vibes, Good Life by Vex King, and the other one is Lighter by Young Pueblo. So I'll just leave it with that. They're really inspirational. The good vibes, good life thing is really helpful for anybody that's been through any, I don't know, challenging situations, trauma, things like that in their life. It's a really good self-help kind of therapy book.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A bucket list travel destination.
Okay, so interesting thing here. I've still never been out of the States, and I didn't fly until I was 31.
But you've been to so many states.
I have been to lots of states. So in terms of places, bucket list that I've been that I would go back to over and over again would definitely be Arches National Park in Moab, Utah. Absolutely gorgeous. Anything, honestly, in Utah, like the national parks, Snow Canyon, Zion, all those were absolutely beautiful. Outside of the States, bucket lists are, of course, your tropical destinations.
Sure.
Tulum, Bora Bora, Maldives, all those types of places, just to, encounter a beach and relax, right? And somewhere where I could actually turn the phone off and be okay with it, right?
Yeah. Got you. If you could spend an hour with anyone, living or dead, real or fictional, who would it be?
This has changed over time, but right now it's just Steve Jobs with what he did with Apple and the kind of the ups and downs, honestly, that they had, and just kind of his mindset and his thinking. I certainly want to. I've heard lots of stories, right, that he was kind of an a-hole. I wouldn't want to be that, but just from the wisdom perspective of, his thinking, right, and some of his quotes are very, inspirational, and how he built that company. Built it fell, right, and then he came back and built it up again into what it is today under Tim Cook's leadership.
And then if you weren't doing, well, you're doing pretty often. You're doing a lot pretty often.
Yeah.
You were recently hosted a TED Talk. You went to Florida for Autix, and I believe that was a trade show or a demo. You were able to
Big car event. Yes.
Big car event. So if you weren't doing all of this, what would you be doing?
I think, what did I write down? I said, I'm always working or building a business, right? So, but if I weren't,
same thing.
but if I weren't, I'm a drummer, so I love music. So I love to play drums. Unfortunately, since I moved down here, I'm in an apartment waiting for my daughter. She graduates high school here soon. So eventually getting a house, buying another drum kit. So I'd be drumming. I love live music. It's something that there's always live music going on in Dallas, which is awesome. Whether it's a headlining act or it's just a local, dive bar with some, live music or live band karaoke that I've stumbled across on Wednesday nights. And then if I get the opportunity to go off-roading in my Jeep, I've done that a couple times as well.
Yeah.
So there's not as many trails as I thought there would be around here, but there are some really good ones. So that's something that hopefully as I get into next year, I'll be able to do. Now that I've dropped a bunch more money into the Jeep that needed fixed, I can go do that again. So
nice. So let's wrap it up with, just giving you a chance. Anything that you would like to mention that maybe we haven't, asked a question for or didn't get to cover, what would it be?
Yeah, there's so many things. You touched on one of them. So I just gave a TED Talk out in St. George, Utah, about a month and a half ago. It just got posted on YouTube not too long ago. It's really more about my personal journey and the things that I've kind of gone through from being a young widow and navigating food addiction and those types of things. It does have some tie-ins to, my experience that we kind of talked about today. That has led to some other opportunities. I'll be doing a interview and an article with Forbes magazine sometime soon, hoping that'll come out sometime in January. And doing some other consulting work on the side and continuing to grow Autix, and just as of today, started the process of writing a book. So plenty of things going on. It's just keeping them all organized. There's a whole separate talk on that in terms of like personal productivity and staying organized and juggling so many balls. That's what people are always asking, like, how do you do all these different things? Like, well, there's a system to it. So, and my number one strength was discipline. So trying to, making sure that all that stuff stays consistent and following through. So yeah, no big deal. Just just the TED Talk, which I'm hoping, can lead to more. At the end of the day, I want to help other people.
Yeah.
My goal, if you go to my website and stuff, is like my ultimate goal is to give to others and help others. So whether that's through the, business side of things and what I've been through as an entrepreneur, or the life side and some of the, challenges and struggles that I faced, it's about giving back. So through all those things, through Autix, through my consulting business, through the TED Talk, through a book, that's at the end of the day, that's my goal. So I'll always be an entrepreneur. Like I said, I'll always be building something, when something else new comes about. And it's just kind of built into my DNA now. And I wouldn't want to be doing anything else.
That's awesome. So how do they find your TED Talk? What's the title, and then what's your website?
So the TED Talk, you can search on YouTube,
Okay.
just Jake Hamann, The Art of Disruption, through the TEDx channel. And then my personal website's just my name.me, jakehamann.me. And then Autix is autix.co. So, and then my website is kind of the central point, and you can find everything kind of from there. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being on our podcast today. We really enjoyed having you and learning about Autix, learning about what it's like to be in the portfolio, what it's like to be in DFW. And so thank you for taking the time out to come with us today. And that'll about do it for our podcast. So stick around and join us for the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to another great episode of McKinney Momentum. Would love if you would subscribe to our channel on YouTube or wherever podcasts are downloaded if you prefer the audio. It's been great hearing from Mike and Jake and all things Innovation Fund. And as always, you can learn more about the Innovation Fund and what we do for startups and entrepreneurs at uniquemckinney.com. We'll see you there.